Welcome to another edition of the SSPX podcast, delivering sermons, lectures, and the spoken word from across the English-speaking world. Today we'll be speaking with Mr. James Vogel, the editor of Angelus Press, about this year's upcoming Angelus Press Conference and why its topic, life, is so important for 2018. We'll also discuss a little bit of the history of Angelus Press and what its prospects are moving forward. Now our interview. Today on the SSPX podcast, instead of talking with one of our clerics, we are speaking with the editor of Angelus Press, Mr. James Vogel. Hello, Jim. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Andrew?
Good, good. Well, we are getting really close to the annual conference in Kansas City, so wanted to have you on and chat with you a little bit about that. I'm sure you're not busy at all getting ready for this.
Yeah, something like that.
So this is a big year for Angelus Press, not just because of the scope of the conference, but also because Angelus Press is celebrating an anniversary. Is that right?
That's right. It is our 40th anniversary, and the conference. This is our 9th conference, but it's not explicitly a celebration of 40 years of Angelus Press, but it is something we plan on commemorating, and it is a minor miracle in the modern world that people still buy books and read magazines and come to our conference. So, we are always edified when anybody buys or comes to anything we do, because if you haven't been paying attention to the news, 2018 is not a great time to be a traditional Catholic. So, it's only through Our Lady that we have anything going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is something that when you want to see divine intervention, you take a look at the people that are running things. And I'm not referring to you, but I'm just referring to the fact that it's a publishing house, and it's supposed to be something that's a dying industry. And Angelus Press is still going strong and still one of the flagships for traditional Catholicism, at least in the United States.
Yeah, this actually, we're on record to have our best year ever. And I invite anyone who's listening, if you get discouraged and you start to despair, and those are understandable reactions to the world we live in, come to our warehouse in Kansas City and just take a look at the shipping orders, because, I sometimes wonder who these people are that are out there still looking for the truth, still looking for some sanity. And, when you're tempted to think everything's going wrong, it's nice to know that there are little pockets of hope. And I'm not saying Angelus Press is one of those pockets of hope. I think we are, but there are still people out there who are discovering the Mass, discovering tradition, and that should lift everyone's spirits.
Yeah, it does. So you bring up an interesting point. You have a warehouse in Kansas City, and it was started in Dickinson, Texas, some 40 years ago. Can you give us just a brief history? It was what, a print? I've seen some old pictures. Father Pulvermacher with a printing press. Is that basically how the Angelus started?
Yeah, it's a great history, because it was kind of Father Bolduc's idea, and then Father Pulvermacher was the man on the ground. But there was a huge staff of volunteers in the early days, and they without them, Angelus Press would not be what it is. They did all the heavy lifting back in the late 70s and early 80s. They were printing and stapling and binding things, had very humble beginnings. And again, it's totally providence. There's no human reason that an enterprise like that should have become what Angelus Press is today. So yeah, without that early band of brave and devoted volunteers, nothing we're talking about today would have been possible.
That's great. And you fast forward 40 years, and the Angelus, which is the name of the magazine itself, the Angelus, that it is still going strong and putting out issues. And there's a growing staff putting on conferences and putting out publications, and things are looking really promising for the organization, which is a blessing.
They are, and it's we have the warehouse in Kansas City, we have our offices in St. Mary's, but we've also got a team of employees sort of spread around the country, whether they're translators or editors or writers. Modern technology does allow us to make use of talent no matter where they are. I mean, look, you're sitting in Phoenix recording this podcast, and the podcast is another example of something relatively new that we're doing. And I'm sitting in Kansas, so we have some pretty big plans. I think as long as we stay faithful to what the original mission of Angelus Press was, we'll continue to grow, God willing, and try to reach as many souls as we can.
I was talking with Father Robinson a few weeks ago, and he drew the beautiful analogy as long as your will and God's will are in alignment, then there's no stopping what could happen. So with that said, I wanted to pivot a little bit towards the conference. So we brought up the Angelus, which is the magazine that many people are familiar with. Recent issue, July-August issue, touched on the topic of life, which is obviously a huge issue. And that is the topic of the conference for this 9th year, October 12th through the 14th in Kansas City. Why the topic life? Why this year?
Okay, so two things that I want to say here. The first is that we've always tried to use a theme for our conferences. So we've done conferences in the past on Our Lady and on the Mass and on the missions. So, when we were talking last year about what the theme would be for this year, someone pointed out that it was the 50th anniversary of Humanae Vitae. Really, what we decided was we'll take this anniversary as an occasion to talk about what the church teaches on life in general. Because when people hear the church's teaching on life, often they think first of things like abortion and contraception. And those are clearly, let's say, probably the most important things, especially in 2018. But we also suspected that, most people don't need to hear a lecture on why abortion is evil. Mm-hmm. Traditional Catholics, conservative Catholics, they already know that. What we're trying to do is look at the broad scope of what the church teaches on life. Everything from end-of-life issues like do not resuscitate orders to the debate about ordinary and extraordinary means of preserving life, to just war theory, to what it's like to try to be a Catholic doctor in the modern world. But that's the theme of the conference. What does the church teach about life in all of its facets?
That's not a heavy thing to try and tackle at all. And I'm looking at the website and the lineup and the topics, which is at angeluspress.org/conference, talking about warfare, talking about immigration, talking about mental health, capital punishment. I was talking to some friends and I said, I know I help with a lot of Angelus Press stuff, but guys, no, really, this is the best lineup I think they've ever done. This is going to be great.
I think so. I hope so. It's certainly the most, in a way, provocative lineup that we've had because, for instance, when we planned this conference, we had obviously no idea that the Holy Father would change the catechism when it comes to something like capital punishment. We were going to have a talk on that anyway, but that suddenly becomes a lot more relevant when the official catechism is changed. So, and obviously the current situation in the church will probably raise a lot of good questions too. So, these aren't happy circumstances in the sense of they're not good for the universal church necessarily, but they do make our conference more relevant than even when we planned it. I'm not primarily here to sell the conference. I actually am here to sell the conference. But whether you can make it in person or you can buy the talks afterwards, I do think there's something kind of for everyone here. You mentioned the mental health question. I think that is a topic of some debate, among traditional Catholics.
Yeah.
What are the limits of psychology, and can you trust people in the mental health field? What should traditional Catholics even think about the question of mental health? So that's a pretty unique topic. It is broadly connected to the question of life. And what I always tell people who are wondering about whether they should attend is that you might not appreciate every talk. There might be some talks that are not interesting to you, but I can almost guarantee that there's something for everyone. I think we try to balance our talks appropriately.
So I wanted to go back real quick, Jim, to talking about Humanae Vitae. And this is something when I hear or when I see reference to encyclicals that were promulgated post-Vatican II, I instantly go, all right, not so great. I mean, that's just kind of my knee-jerk reaction, having been brought up in cradle traditional Catholicism. And I'm embarrassed to say this. It's only been in this past year that I've realized that there was a decent amount of good things in Humanae Vitae, which Pope Paul VI put out. Is that fair to say?
In a way, yeah. I mean, what Humanae Vitae is known for most famously is its condemnation of artificial birth control. And that's certainly something that traditional Catholics can applaud and celebrate and defend. It was controversial even at its time, and there are some in the church who would like to even change that teaching. So that kind of shows you how far things have gone when now even Humanae Vitae is considered this trad encyclical by people on the left in the church.
Right.
We're going to get into this at the conference. Yeah, there are some issues that need to be discussed. So, there's the traditional understanding of the order of the ends of marriage. The primary end of marriage is the procreation and education of children. And the secondary end is the mutual support of the spouses. Now, that got muddied and even reversed in subsequent years. So just taking the occasion of Humanae Vitae to clarify these things and to help people learn how to explain these sometimes complicated distinctions to other Catholics or people in the world. Humanae Vitae, in the end, is a lot more than just condemning artificial contraception.
Right.
So,
and His Excellency Bishop Fillet, Bishop Bernard Fillet, will be at the conference for the first time in several years. He'll be giving the talk on Humanae Vitae. He's calling it 50 years since Humanae Vitae. Where's the Church Today? That'll be the Saturday evening conference. Excited to be able to see him again in Kansas City at the conference, the now former Superior General.
When we planned this conference, he was the Superior General.
Right.
Now he's a counselor to the Superior General. But fortunately, his talk will be the same. His talks have always been well received, and we're honored to have His Excellency. Hopefully, he's a little better rested without being the Superior General. Yeah, being Superior General for 24 years is taxing, I imagine.
Yeah, you think. You mentioned earlier on that some of these talks might be controversial. I would gather so, because we'll be talking about warfare. We'll be talking about immigration, talking about capital punishment. And I know that Angelus Press, the SSPX, this conference, it's not there to try and, we're going to put out this statement and see how it sells. It's not that. It's talking about church teaching. But do you think that there are a lot of misconceptions? Is that why you say that these topics will be controversial, that there's misconceptions about some of these questions about, capital punishment, immigration, war, et cetera?
I do, and we've tackled some of these issues in the Angelus and on the website. And two things to keep in mind. One is that maybe something interesting for people listening to the podcast. It's not all traditional Catholics necessarily who come to our conference. I would say it's mainly traditional Catholics, and I know one of the reasons people like to come is because living in the modern world, you don't often have people of like mind that you can just sit down and have a human conversation with.
Right.
But we do get a fairly diverse crowd of people. So we assume we're starting from ground zero. So when you bring up a topic like capital punishment or just war, we're assuming that the attendees might be confused. Maybe they've heard different things. When I say controversial, it's because you can see this from the recent change in the catechism on capital punishment. A lot of people see that and they're just confused. They don't know what to think. Now, am I obliged as a Catholic to believe that capital punishment is inadmissible? Maybe I don't know what the church taught about capital punishment throughout history. Maybe, but now it's suddenly a talk that was, in my mind, not going to be one of the more controversial talks, might be one of the most controversial talks, because now we explain to people what the church has always taught and what level of assent they have to give to the new catechism if the Pope decides to change it. So it's in that sense that I say it's controversial, because there will be people there coming to the conference to learn, not just how to explain it to other people. That's a secondary thing, but what am I supposed to think? And even for myself, these are not easy issues. That's the reason we have a conference. I mean, you're right. If we wanted to just pack the room and make a lot of money, we would choose different topics. But one of the best things about the conference to me is hearing the conversations after the talks, hearing people talk about what line or what argument a speaker made that made them sort of start to think. And that happens a lot. There's a lot of conviviality. I mean, I can almost say that the talks are the central point of the conference, but in a way, they're not even necessarily the most important, because it's that camaraderie and conviviality that comes with people being in the same place for a weekend and sitting down and starting to chew on what you heard and talk about it with other people. And that's one of the reasons I encourage people to attend. I know there are some who can't, and that's why we sell the audio afterwards. But there really is something about physically being there with a lot of, I'm a bad marketer, but I have seen this tangibly every year, almost every talk, seeing the people discuss it.
I would say you're a fairly decent marketer, Jim, because that was exactly what I wanted to talk about next was that whole being part of the conference. Wanted to, in our last few minutes here, talk about that whole atmosphere. We're not just going to be sitting in a room listening to doctors and professionals and the bishop and different priests talking. Yeah. There are other things planned. There's meals, there's trivia night, there's socialization. Can you talk on some of the intangibles of the conference a little bit to kind of give people a sense of what they will see and feel and be exposed to during the conference?
Right. So that's a good point, and it's a good question. We try to stagger the schedule in such a way that people have a lot of time to visit our vendors and talk to one another and not have a frenzied pace surrounding the weekend. You know, we have the Pontifical High Mass on Sunday at one of the few true beautiful churches the Society has in America. Mm-hmm. I hope no one's offended by that. But St. Vincent de Paul in Kansas City is actually an old, big, beautiful Catholic church.
Yes.
We don't have very many of those. And so what I've noticed over the years is that a lot of people who come to the conference almost come primarily for that sense of, you know, you're living out in the world, scattered across the country. You might have to drive a long way to Mass on Sunday, but for at least 3 days, you can be around your comrades in arms, so to speak. And we have a trivia night, and we try to encourage people to get together. And I think this year we're actually planning some things for the youth as well.
Oh, good.
I mean, we always have a lot of schools that send students, but, you know, we're trying to emphasize the social nature of our conference as well, because it is hard to be a traditional Catholic in 2018. You and me sitting on this phone call, you know, we live in places where we live close to priories and we have daily Mass, we have schools and so on. But a lot of people out there don't have that community life. They're not used to being around fellow traditional Catholics every day.
I was talking with a young lady from Georgia last year who came to our conference. She goes to our chapel in Atlanta, but she lives fairly far away, rural, and goes, there are a lot of people here. And she said it in the sense of, there's a lot of people like me here. It was almost this light in her eyes of, this is fantastic. So that's why I say it's sort of an intangible, but it's once you get to the conference, it's really not. If you're someone who is living a couple hours from a priory or like you said, has Mass maybe once every 2 weeks or something like this is such a beautiful event to come and be a part of.
No, and if I can brag, we have actually had marriages that have occurred as a result of people meeting at the conference.
That's awesome.
It's not why we do it.
Right.
I'm not advertising our conference as a matchmaking service. That's not our business. But yeah, I mean, people who live in far-flung places come, and it has happened that they meet someone of like mind and they stay in touch, and then they get married. So I do think the social aspect is something we try to focus on, because this is not something we realized when we first started these conferences. But there's a lot of people out there thirsty for just normal human interaction with like-minded people, and we try to help. We try to encourage that.
That's great. Well, Jim, thank you so much for the time. There's more information about the conference as well at angeluspress.org/conference, and to see the lineup, see a video, it kind of gives you a sense of what it's like. There are some seats still available. Also, if you are not able to make it, and if you're feeling exceptionally generous, what you can do also is donate a ticket for one of the religious to go. Angelus Press does not charge for the religious to attend or for priests to attend, but they do accept donations to help defray the cost. Is that right?
That is correct. And, you know, you'd be surprised sometimes how many priests and seminarians and religious would love to come, and they can't because they can't afford it. So we don't charge them. We don't charge them any money to come to the conference. In fact, we subsidize them, because one of the main apostolates of the society, and you know, even the reason for its being, and by extension Angelus Press, is to help the priests. So that is an important thing. We try to help as many of them as want to come. And I would point out the other thing, which is, yes, we still have some room. It's getting tight, but if we sell out, we've done this, I think, 2 years, we will live stream the conferences, but that's only if we sell out. So if you're sitting on the fence, I would encourage you to register, because there's no guarantee that we will live stream the conferences. Right. And again, that circles back to the whole socialization aspect too. And I'm not bragging on behalf of Angelus Press, but I've yet to meet a person in 8 years of doing this that regretted coming to the conference. So if you have any doubts, call the Angelus Press team and feel free to ask questions. If you do have some concerns or doubts, or if you're on the fence, let us help you get off the fence one way or another.
Well, this is a great chat. And just in closing, I want to say, we talked about the conference today. This is one aspect of what Angelus Press does as an apostolate. I hope that we can chat again soon in the future and talk a little bit more about all the different things that Angelus Press does. Yes, there's the magazine. Yes, there's books. Yes, there's the conference. I think those are the things that people really know, but there's so much more to it. So I'd love to chat with you again here in the next 3 weeks, maybe once the conference is done and once you can take a breath.
Let's do that, because this podcast is one of the new things that we're doing. And again, we're trying to reach people in any way we can. If any of you out there have suggestions, the man interviewing me is helping. He helps with our social media outreach, and obviously we're doing the podcast now. We're starting to do more videos. So if you have ideas or suggestions, we're always happy to hear them.
And donations are helpful too. Just saying.
They do help. They really do. They enable things like this conversation.
Exactly. All right, Jim. Well, I won't take any more of your time. Thanks so much, and we will see you at the conference.
All right. God bless.
You too. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and rate the podcast so that more people can hear the beauty and truth of traditional Catholicism. For more news, resources, and updates, you can visit the U.S. District website at sspx.org or the English news website of the Society at fsspx.news.